Thank you to Marcus for having me on. I've written a couple of vigilante thrillers, a late 60s historical romance, some short stories, working on a dystopia. You were kind enough to have me on. You've read one of my books, and you're kind of in the middle of another one, and we're just going to talk about it. We're going to chill and talk about whatever comes to mind.
Describe your writing process.
Process is a process of discipline. Of course, it has to do, you have to be inspired, you have to have an idea, you have to be compelled. For me, it's about compulsion. If there's something that I cannot stop thinking about, I have to coalesce it. And for me, the way I do that is through writing novels. And it's kind of an exercise. It's kind of an exorcism. It sort of gets the issue out of me, and then I can move on from something. But the process of writing is a daily, habitual slog of self-discipline. And I try to do 1,000 words a day. No One Shall Last Forever took me 6 months to write, and that was a frenetic, obsessive process for me. I had just left teaching high school English. I had witnessed a troubled young man be misused in an administration that said they cared nothing about their only care was for the children, their only care is for the students. And yet when they have a troubled student, I saw exactly what they did, and they kicked him out as soon as they could. And he left in handcuffs, saying he was going to kill everyone in the school. And I thought, well, the chances of him coming back, and there's one section of the book that is that story. And it's the only part of the book that's true. It's when he flashes back, when he has the memory of him, of having taught, and he retells the reader that story. That is based on truth. I obviously fictionalized it to disguise names, because I'm not interested in exposing or doxing people. But it was a very particularly jarring episode in my life, and it was really disturbing, and I wanted to help that kid, and I was totally powerless, and that is a terrible feeling. This kid was 14 years old. He had reached out many times, and his cries were unheard, and then he lost it, and then he flipped out. And this is not to make any excuse for the young men who become psychotic. The psychosis is inexcusable. Obviously, the violence and the murder is inexcusable, and they deserve the fullest punishment under the law. But prior to, they are often helpless, intelligent, but helpless kids who are quite bullied. And the school, for all of its sociopathic, well, for all of its good talk about helping children and being there for children, there's a sociopathic effect in their lack of action, because they often do not help these kids, and they just want them out the door so that they're not their problem anymore. And the same thing happened with the kid in the Florida school. I can't remember his name, and I don't remember the town. But anyway, there was a Florida shooting, and he was the same sort of profile. The profile isn't always the same, but the school shooters often have parallels in terms of their psychological description. Again, not excusing the psychopathy of mass murder. It is abhorrent, and these boys should be locked away for life if they take that step to do this. But again, prior to, I saw how the system is also complicit in facilitating some of the psychosis, and it's very bad stuff.
What got you into writing and storytelling?
I always wanted to be an artist. I always wanted to be a creative person, and it just sort of evolved this way. I started writing when I was 24. It's a practice. It's something you have to work on. Very few people are just naturally gifted writers who can just sit down and write something incredibly readable and compelling. It is something that you have to do over and over and over again. The first novel I ever wrote is unpublished and will continue to be so. There are a lot of short stories that I wouldn't publish. There's a lot of work that is crap, that is not worth anyone's attention. And that's true of any discipline. That's true of any practice. That's true of any profession. You have to do things over and over again until you get it right, until it's worthy of an audience. Yeah, it's just storytelling. I think it's a natural thing for most people. Everyone tells stories all day, every day, and it's a natural aspect of human being. What makes me want to have control over a narrative and specify character and specify action and sort of be the wizard of a world, I don't know. It's an interest I've had since I probably was first exposed to Shakespeare, in any kind of serious substantive way in college, where I was really studying this drama and what the structure of drama entails and why it's an interesting way to reflect the world as it is, to reflect human experience. I was just drawn in, and it
That's
was
good.
something related to my skill set. I don't have a tremendous amount of skill sets. I was an excellent high school English teacher, and I think I'm a pretty good novelist. But beyond that, I don't really know what my skills are.
Is there a future for honest storytelling?
I think there's always a future for honest storytelling. Now, will it be embraced in the future is a different question. I'm an honest storyteller. I'm sure I'm one of many people who are writing stories, screenplays, plays, fiction right now, who are completely ignored, who might be disparaged for it, who might be rejected for it. I've certainly been rejected for it. I mean, when I went to a pitch conference in Manhattan, I was learning how to pitch a book, and I brought with me No Winter Lasts Forever, which is the mass shooting book, and I was just told that we can't be seen supporting this issue, which always sort of struck me odd, because true crime podcasts, nonfiction, documentaries use the real names of the real victims, describing their actual murders in gory detail, and they're making millions from that content. And no one ever criticizes them for they're not outraged by that financial production. But I write a novel and fictionalize the whole thing, and it's this horrific, immoral transgression. And that's what the agent was literally telling me. We don't want the heat of outrage for making money off of a novel that's about a very serious true crime set of events. And I think it's because nonfiction gives the reader distance. It doesn't involve them, whereas fiction is visceral. It gets you in your gut. You are drawn into the story in such a way that your outrage is provoked. And that's why that happens. It's not because it's any worse than the nonfiction. It's not because it's more immoral than the true crime producers who are making millions off of that. And I never intended to make millions off of this issue. If I did, what would I do with the money? Would I donate it to causes that maybe, I don't know. I'm just dramatizing the culture I find myself in. And people either respond to it or they don't. I've moved 2,500 copies of that book. I'm very proud of that, because I am completely unsupported by the industry. I mean, I've been blatantly told, white men don't bother. We're not interested. So aye, Captain, I hear you loud and clear. I'm on my own. Thank you. And so to be able to move those copies on my own is good. I've not made any money from it. I don't really intend to. I don't really see a future for it, because, as you say, your other question is there a future for this kind of thing, or the second part of that question? And I'm not really convinced that there is. I think people are so wrapped up in outrage, so willing to condemn and destroy any attempt to artfully and actually illustrate the culture as it is, because it has so many problems, because it is so demoralized. They do not want to confront it. It's not because they necessarily have an interest in it being demoralized, but they cannot tolerate in their own psyches accepting and facing just how bad it's become. And that's what fiction does. It puts you in your face in the issue in your face in an undeniable way. And I think people are really offended by it because they don't want to accept it. And there's nothing I can do. I get reviews from people who say, I didn't want to like this book. The premise really shook me, but you handled it really well and you handled it sensitively. And I was really, really mistaken for my initial prejudice of the content. And I again, that's a huge compliment. I wrote it to try to give it as much truth, as much passionate veracity as I could imbue into this story, based on my personal experience as a teacher, based on just being an American in this society. I wanted to give it I wanted to do justice to it, to everyone involved. It's not my place to glorify violence. It's not my interest to glorify psychopathy. In fact, there's very little gore in the book at all. There's blood splatter in the very opening on the lockers, but I never describe a mangled human being, because it serves no purpose in this novel. This is a tragedy. This isn't a horror. Although I think it has horrific elements. It's very difficult. I mean, when you write about these kinds of things, and especially now, America has always been troubled by its flaws, has always been troubled by its inadequacies, has always had a kind of moral inferiority complex for some reason, has always felt like trash. Let's just say it bluntly, right? White, black, Hispanic, whatever. We all feel like secondhand goods to some extent. It doesn't have to be that way. I don't know why that kind of insecurity with reality evolved the way it did. Maybe it has something to do with the brutality of our history. Whether you're looking at slavery in the South or you're looking at pioneers expanding, westwardly, that was a brutal experience that did not let up. That did not give them a second's rest.
Why should people purchase the book?
If they're interested, they should look into it. It is a difficult issue. It is a difficult subject. I think I handle it well. I think I pay it its due respect. And I think it's I think we need to start. Look, there's other than we need to talk about Kevin by Lionel Shriver. I don't think there are many novels, and that one's more about the mother and her and the aftermath that the mother goes through. It's not about what makes the event happen or the events themselves. No one's touched this subject, and I understand it's a difficult thing to address, but I did, and if you want to give it a shot, please do.